Hello and welcome to our viewers across Nigeria and around the world. I am Imuni Amarere. Nigeria's 10th National Assembly is expected to resume from its first break this week after observing the Salah holiday. And one of the first legislative duties the Senate will most certainly deal with, apart from the selection of its principal officers, the constitution of its standing committees, and the confirmation of the appointments of the newly named service chiefs, is the screening and confirmation of ministerial nominees by the president. Going by the provisions of the Fifth Amendment to the 1999 Nigerian Constitution, which was assented to by former President Muhammadu Buhari, the president and state governors are mandatorily required to submit their ministerial and commissionership nominees to the national and state assemblies for confirmation within 60 days after taking oaths of office. From available information and going by the pace at which the Tinubu administration has moved in the last 1 month since its inauguration, the list of ministerial nominees is likely to arrive the Senate anytime now. But when it does, what will it look like? What are the expectations of Nigerians? What will be its composition, and who should and should not be there? What caliber of persons do Nigerians expect and want on the federal cabinet? Will it be the usual business of politicians, or a mix of bureaucrats, politicians, and professionals who are ready and willing to work for the welfare, the well-being, and the development of Nigerians and Nigeria? Who and what does Nigeria deserve at this point in time? Now, whereas the federal government currently has about 27 ministries, the Nigerian Constitution in Section 147 provides that the president shall appoint a minister from each state of the federation, who must be an indigene of such a state. This means that the least number of ministers that the president can appoint would be 36, representing each of Nigeria's 36 states. Past administrations had to deal with this constitutional albatross by appointing ministers of state to represent some states. However, a minister of state in the last dispensation has said this is a constitutional aberration that should not be done, or should be done away with. So, how should the current administration deal with this situation? Why not overlooking the political interests of a cross-section of Nigerians? How can it balance the economic necessity of a compact but efficient government structure with the ever-increasing desire of political power seekers? And given the economic challenges that Nigeria is going through, should it continue with an over-bloated bureaucracy of about 27 ministers and 27 ministries? These are some of the questions that we will seek to find answers to on the program today. And you will be meeting my guest analysts who are already here in the studio right after now. Stay with us.
On air, online, online.
All right, let's get to meet our guest analysts who are right here in the studio. First, from my immediate left is Dr. Dan Moe. Dr. Moe is a good governance advocate and the executive chairman of the Center for Poverty Eradication, Development, and Equal Opportunity. Thank you so much for joining us.
Nice meeting you.
Also joining us is Umar Yakubu, Mr. Yakubu is the Executive Director, Center for Fiscal Transparency and Integrity Watch. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
For joining us.
Thank you for inviting.
Welcome.
Welcome.
And of course, as a reminder, let's tell you that we're looking at the possible cabinet composure of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu when that list eventually gets to the Senate, hopefully later this week. What will it look like? What will it be? What will be its coloration? What will be the caliber of persons and individuals who are nominated by the president? And will the president follow in the footsteps of his predecessors by producing a large cabinet that, of course, would have its consequences on the Nigerian economy, an economy that is said to be struggling very hard to survive. Gentlemen, once again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, sir.
Let me begin with you, Dr. Moore.
Yes.
What are your expectations if and when the president eventually sends a list? Because as we hear, it will be in batches. It may not be. The president may decide to send all his ministerial nominees all at once to the Senate for screening and confirmation. Whichever it is, what are your expectations? What would you want to see happen?
No, naturally, it's constitutionally required that the president will have a minister from each of the states of the federation. So I know that because it's a constitutional issue, he will not violate that. So I'm expecting that at the end, whether it is staggered or sent at once, there will be 36 ministers of the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
At least 36.
At least 36, because that's a constitutional requirement. And I do not expect that he will violate that.
Okay.
But if you're talking in terms of the caliber of people or the quality of the people, you know, we expect that it will be people that he believes that are competent enough to be able to do the job. And he will determine their competency not just by being close to him. We expect that Nigeria is his entire constituency, and it's not just even the APC, which is his political party, but because Nigeria is his entire constituency, he will look at all corners of Nigeria to get the best brains that he believes can help him perform. Because in the ultimate analysis, his performance is more important than just the loyalty of the party. So, and he has been talking from his various interviews. We have been hearing of a unity government because he's somebody, as you know, who is interested, you know, President Bola Tinubu is somebody who is interested in national unity. So I'm expecting that he will have a cabinet that it will be made up of competent men and women drawn from all sectors of the economy. There will be politicians, of course, but I'm expecting that there will also be technocrats and experts in their various areas. Therefore, I think that the cabinet that he will come up with, having judged him from the few appointments he has made, we believe that they will be of high class.
Mr. Yakubu.
Yes, sir.
Yes, so first, let's get your take on what you think would happen when the president eventually sends a list to the National Assembly, to the Senate. What do you think he would do or he should do?
Yeah, what he would do is naturally he would not violate the Constitution in the sense that there has to be at least 36 nominees to represent each state of the Federation.
The previous administration had about 44 or so ministers. Do you think that he would be towing that line, or he may want to restrict himself to the 36 states?
Well, that's, I said, the minimum, because the first thing is to satisfy the constitutional requirement to have a minimum of 36. I'd want to believe now that is what he has to do, whether it's not a choice because it's a constitutional requirement. But what we expect him to do is, first of all, to look at the problems Nigeria currently has. Whether we like it or not, we have over $100 billion debt. Whether we like it or not, we have about 44 trillion naira debt. These are facts that we have to solve. We have the security problem, we have the unemployment problem, and there's no country that can survive without solving at least the security and the economic problem. What that means is that whoever he's bringing, these 36 plus and more, must be able to understand these are the pressing issues of Nigerians, and that these people can solve these problems. Usually we like to talk about the 3 C's: character, competence, and capacity to deliver. Now it is very easy. there is no academic discipline you are looking for in Nigerians that will not get competent Nigerians that have not excelled in that field of academic endeavor. Physics, maths, nuclear physics, anything we're looking for, we get them both home and abroad. So that is not a problem. When we're looking for technocrats, you get people. When you're looking for people that have even done well in their personal lives, in their private businesses, there are regimes, let's say from the Obasanjo regime, where we even brought in people that have done well in multilateral institutions, in private businesses, they excelled. But when they came here, it was a different story. So, and when it now comes to capacity, there are people too that have the intellectual capacity to digest information and really do what it's supposed to do. So that is not the issue of those 3 C's. The problem where we need to solve this problem is the president. My recommendation is to sit down with every nominee. For now, if he can, I know there are political considerations, but if he can, let politics just take the back seat. Let governance come in. Because the moment politics dominates the conversation, we are going to go back to our earlier problems and we might not be able to solve some of these problems. Because political considerations have a way. Politics is important, no doubt. But political considerations have a way of dowsing down of what ought to be done. So if, as much as he can, push politics, compensations and all those things to the back seat, bring these people that have, yes, the competence in terms of academic qualifications, then the character, which is very important, but it's also important to highlight we have seen people with good character before government. When they get into governance, they change. So all these things are not things we can just say he can just choose. But he should sit down with every nominee, itemize what the problems are for that sector. For example, water resources, communications, power sector, petroleum sector, and give a marching order. Let me even use that language, a marching order, that these are things you have to deliver within a time frame. Because the problems we have had in the past is getting people that are competent, they have the capacity, they probably even have the right character. But when the leader is not checking and matching those things, monitoring and evaluation, when you are not checking and penalizing, then you find that the person fails. So in the long run, the buck stops at the leader to select the right people, and the buck still stops at him to ensure that they do the right thing. So it's all about leadership.
Dr. Mo, at the moment we have 27 ministries. Yes, we don't know whether or not the president might want to reduce those number of ministries, merge some of them and what have you. But you have 36 states, and that means we're going to have 36 ministerial nominees. A minister of state in the immediate past association, in fact 2 of them, did say that the position of minister of state was like a surplus. In fact, one of them described it as a constitutional aberration, which should be done away with. So how does he then manage, how does the president then manage this situation side by side with the constitutional mandate to produce 36 ministers? Where do the other ministers go to?
Well, all we can do really is to advise him. Now, if you ask for what will I think the president should do in that instance, I will support the 2 ministers of state that say they should not make an appointment of a minister of state. Because you see, in the past, there have been ministers that had to 3 portfolios combined and given to one individual. You remember the case where the Minister of Works, the Minister of the Environment and Housing were all given to one person. And yet there were other ministers that were ministers of state. I share the view that the concept of minister of state should be abolished because it's discriminatory to those states where a minister of state is being appointed. We are serving a federal system where the states have the autonomy and the relative with the powers, not just based even on population, but it's based on the fact that you are a state. So if a minister is selected from that and made a minister of state, it's really negative on that particular state. So my advice is that rather than packing every profitable or every large functions, concentrating them in certain ministers, while there are other ministers with little or nothing to do, that should be avoided this time. So my advice to him would be to divide the ministry such that we have at least 36 ministries. For instance, if we took the ministry where Fashola, the former governor of Lagos State was, there were 4 ministries put in one ministry and given one person. And there were other people who were ministers of state. That doesn't make sense to me. I think that that should be avoided. Our ministry should be divided in such a way that at least there will be 36 strategic pieces where every minister representing every state will be made a full minister and given a cabinet minister and given a position.
With all the bureaucracies that go with
all the bureaucracies that go with
such an arrangement?
Yeah, you know, remember that as you were talking the case of just the immediate outgoing president, the recently gone president, Buhari, for instance. He made 42. So he did not, if you divide only 36, you will have competent and large ministries enough to be able to give a full minister from every state a ministry. And yet it will not be overbloated. It becomes overbloated when you start to go to 36 ministers, 42 ministers. So it's better to keep it at the constitutional level and have the ministries divided in such a way that there is no minister of state at all. Every state is represented as a cabinet minister.
Now, Mr. Yakubu has talked about balancing politics with governance.
That's right.
And at this point, he believes the president should think more of governance than politics. How does he do that? Given the backdrop of the fact that there is a lot of political pressure, I imagine, that will be on him now. I mean, in the last week, during the Salah break, when he was in Lagos, we read of how lobbyists were all over the place waiting for him in his private residence and pursuing him from one part of the city to the other. How does he balance this very delicate issue of governance with politics without necessarily having to disappoint those who claim or who may claim to have worked for his election as president?
You know, the good thing with Nigeria is that in every state or every zone of out of the 6 zones of the country, we have competent people. We also have competent politicians. We have competent technocrats. So I believe that given the support he had in all these places, if he sits down with the help of the security agencies, he will be able to come out with names of people that will be competent in their own areas, will still serve the requirement of federal character, which is a political requirement. So my advice is that he has to make sure that wherever he's picking a minister, he should be based, as my colleague just mentioned, on competence, on capacity, and he should not make the mistake of putting, as they say, square pegs in round holes. In the past, you have had ministers posted to areas that everybody wondered, what can such a minister do in that area? So it's not just a question of considering only politics. But I think that politics, certainly because we are in a political dispensation. But politics in Nigeria is defined in terms of where and how do you choose your ministers. But I believe that every area has a lot of competent people with different areas of specialization. That if he sits down with the help of the security agencies, he will come out with a competent list. But as he said already, when you appointing ministers is one thing. Giving them the right schedule is one thing. But you have to have a very strong monitoring and evaluation framework. The problem in Africa, especially and including Nigeria, is that we don't have an advanced monitoring and evaluation framework. You appoint ministers, for instance, you give a minister of housing and say produce 5,000 units of houses. You don't talk about how many should be duplex, how many should be 3-bedroom, how many should be single bedroom. You just take money and give ministers to go and do the job. You have to be maybe Jesus Christ or Muhammad not to tamper with that kind of money. So in the budgeting process, that is exactly where the monitoring and evaluation should begin. When you are giving a minister, you should first make sure that it's the one that is competent enough to handle that particular portfolio. Then when the allocations are made and approved by the National Assembly, it should also be followed up with monitoring and evaluation. You will realize that the Vision 2020 had made provision for appointment of a Director General that will be in charge of monitoring and evaluation, reporting directly to the President. You will notice that under the Buhari administration, that position was abolished. And I think that position should be restored, where there are powerful people who can monitor ministers and report. You don't wait until at the end of the day when ministers have not performed or misconduct money, and then you start to go after them. If there is monitoring and evaluation, the president can know immediately who is performing and who is not performing, and be able to call that minister to caution. And if that minister still cannot perform in that portfolio, if it requires changing, he can then make the necessary changes. But without proper monitoring and evaluation, it's difficult to understand who is performing and who is not performing. And as a matter of fact, much of what is seen as corruption in Nigeria, or even in Africa, is as a result of lack of monitoring and evaluation. If people know that they have people that are checking them on a daily basis, not when they have finished their assignment and they have left, that you now send people to go and look for them and arrest them. At that time, it doesn't make sense. They may have squandered the money or misallocated the money. But when they are being monitored on a daily basis, and that report is being sent directly to the president can look at what is happening and stop them right at that time, so that they don't have to squander the resources or misapply them before they are finally called to order.
Mr. Yakubu, what has been happening since 1999 in terms of ministerial appointments, ministerial screening, and confirmation in the Senate, for instance, that the president draws up a list, sends to the Senate, and these nominees appear before the Senate. And thereafter, after confirmation, the president allocates them or appoints them to whichever ministry he desires. Now, there are those who have argued that the system should change, that the president or the governor, as the case may be, at the state level, should in fact, in sending names to the Senate and to the State House of Assembly, for instance, sending Mr. Umar Yakubu, he should affix a portfolio so that when he or she is being screened in the Senate, we know exactly what questions to ask and what to look out for. Should that be the case this time? Should the president affix portfolios to names when he is sending to the Senate?
Yes, of course, that makes sense. If you are appointing somebody to a job to do something, it's about the functions of the job. It's not about the name. Just you are a minister and you are just appointed to be a minister and that's it. You are being a minister to execute the vision of the president and to ensure that you are doing it with the best of your ability. So now, it does not help Nigerians start with the National Assembly where you send the name of somebody without the portfolio. Now, not only the portfolio, I would recommend that as you are sending the portfolio, the president, who is a certified Democrat, should also inform the National Assembly and Nigerians of what you expect of that minister. It should be public information. I expect, if I give you example, Minister of Water Resources, that the water utilization or that the access to potable water would drop from 70%, or we increase rather access from the present maybe 40% to say 70%. So that when the senators are asking questions, the National Assembly, sorry, they can now ask, okay, how do you intend to deliver this mandate, this vision of the president, to say from 30% of access to potable water, now you are going to take it to 70%. These are the deep questions we need to be asking, not to just come, ask some questions around the personality of the person and they just leave, which is what has been happening. So yes,
in fact, some have been been asked to take a bow and go,
yes.
Especially when they have served in the National Assembly in the past.
Yeah, yes, sir. So not only the portfolio, actually the objective of giving you that position, whether it's a ministerial position or even head of an agency, what do you expect to do in line with the vision of the president? Because don't forget, the president is applying the vision of the electorate. The people voted for him based on what he said he would do. So it's not really his vision only, it's a vision of those that voted for him and even those that did not vote for him, because he's the president now. So all these things should be in the public domain. So when we're asking the questions, and the monitoring and evaluation he's talking about are in 3 layers. One is not only left for the president to ensure that that head of MDA or minister is doing what he's supposed to do. That is one. The second layer is the National Assembly. They are representing us. They are supposed to check these things, not what we are already know to become an entrepreneur industry where it's for negotiation. That's not what it's supposed to be about. It's supposed to be checking what they're actually supposed to do. It's not a market space. Then the last layer of the monitor evaluation, if this information is in the public domain, is us, the citizens, civil society, traditional rulers, religious bodies, everybody should be involved to know that if this minister or this head of agency has been given a task to deliver on behalf of Nigerians, this is what we expect of him, so that we'll all ask. But if you look at past regimes, you see a minister will all come to say, oh, this minister has not performed. Now, how do you even assess how he has performed or he has not performed? We don't even know the criteria that was set out for him to perform. Nobody knows. They'll say, oh, Abuja is dead. Abuja, there's nothing is working in Abuja. We don't know what the president set for the past or previous ministers of the FCT to set for Abuja. until we know, then we cannot assess. It could be possible to say, okay, no, I'm just appointing you as a minister because I know you, I've known you from somewhere. That could have been the portfolio that he was given.
Or you were recommended by somebody.
You are recommended by somebody. So we need to understand what the precedence or the is given to these ministers or head of agencies and what criteria was set so that we'll monitor, because it's our mandate and our vision that they are working on our behalf. Thank you.
Flowing from that, one would then also ask the whole question of screening in the Senate. For instance, some say, like we said before, too simplistic, and that perhaps the public should be involved. And maybe the Senate should organize public hearings for interaction between the ordinary Nigerian who want to go and seek answers to certain things, to ask these nominees. Is that something that could be implemented, that the Senate could look at?
So if you look at the last Senate screenings, pick any 5 you want of the last ones, they hardly ask of the House. It is easy to come to the floor of the Senate to say, oh, I've had these degrees, I went to these schools, I've had this experience, okay, I'm going to be minister. One, okay, the portfolio is not there, so it's difficult to even ask the questions. Okay, now when I'm minister, the how. You find out how are you going to solve this problem in a data sense. How are you going to reduce the poverty level? How are you going to increase the employment rate? How are you going to reduce maternal mortality rates? All these issues, these are the hows. And they should not be accepting just blanket rhetoric, you know, always thinking that throwing money at the problem solves our problems. Because when you monitor those screenings, you find that most nominees complain about funds. It's always about money, throwing money at the problem. But I've been throwing money at so many problems, and the problems are still there. Some have even gone worse. So the National Assembly needs to be asking deeper questions. Apart from the money, how do you expect, how are you going to achieve the vision of Nigerians and Mr. President? So when they are focused on the how, you find out that, sorry to say, most of them you find out to see that they are actually not qualified to head those positions that they were nominated for, that they were sent there by whatever, for whatever reason, political reasons. That's why I said the politics should just take a step aside for now, because Nigeria will have a lot to do. And this is an opportunity to get so many things right. There's a lot to do, and we can do it and we can achieve it. But once we don't get the right people, right, in the sense with particularly that monitoring and evaluation framework. In fact, there's nothing I recommend. I wish the president will have in his office a screen, a beautiful screen the size of this studio, where he can see the performance of every head of MDA based on the criteria he has set up for him. Every morning he goes to the office, he will sit in his office, so that it's easy to monitor these people. And of course, there will be a criteria set. If you do not perform, you should give somebody, somebody else should come and do it. And I know this may not sound palatable right now, but when you give somebody a job to do and he does not perform, really in our private spaces, in our offices, what do? We penalize. Sometimes we don't even pay the person's salaries. So why do you engage somebody to be a minister or head of an MDA, give him 3 or 4 SUV vehicles, give him a retinue of staff, SAs, all that paraphernalia of office? He doesn't perform and he gets up and goes. What happens to the money, taxpayers' money that we spent on him? And a lot goes into those things. So they just come, they don't perform, and they leave. We should start maybe doing advocacy of to start refunding salaries for non-performance, because it's not a criminal offense in the sense that to say you should jail them, yes, but there should be some administrative sanctions. You can't just come, waste taxpayers' money, be a minister for 4 years, do nothing and leave, and you think that is okay. So I think we should start having discussions around refund of taxpayers' funds for not doing the job you are given to do.
Dr. Mo, do you think that the Senate can be more strategic in its confirmation process, in its screening and determination of who is fit for what position as a minister?
Well, as we have appeared to have agreed here, if a list of ministers is sent and the relevant portfolios indicated against their names, it becomes much easier for the senators themselves to be able to screen such a minister. Because, you see, nobody can claim to know everything. I have my own expertise. He has his own. He has his own. And I believe that in nominating ministers, you nominate people in certain areas based on their expertise in those areas. So it is most important that in sending a list of ministers, you indicate the portfolio that those ministers are going to occupy. And once that is done, it should now be easy for the senators to be able to screen in detail how you are going to perform this job, what is your experience in that area, do you think that you'll be able to perform, and how are you going to go about it? But without portfolios being mentioned, you have really limited the ability of the senators to be able to know, because the questions you want to ask somebody who is going to be a minister of justice will be certainly different from somebody who is going to be a minister of health, for instance. So it is important that the list be sent with the portfolios clearly determined. You have in other countries, you watch the U.S. screening, the White House senators, the U.S. screen. People come, you know exactly what office they are coming for.
In fact, they are screened at committee levels,
yes,
not
so
in the open Congress. Yes.
You know, so you realize that if the list is sent and the specific ministries that are going to be given to them are defined, it's much easier for the Senate to be more strategic and more detailed in its own assessments of the individuals. And it will be easier to know right then who knows the job, who can perform and who cannot perform. It is not a question of sending ministers and getting 100% approval. The Senate has a responsibility to say that these particular individuals cannot perform, change them. So they should do that job, but they can do it only if you define for them which particular ministries you are going to assign to all your ministers.
All right. Well, let's go on a short break. When we return, we'll be looking at whether or not the president can and should go across party lines to look for Nigerians with competence and capacity to run his government. Stay with us. Thank you so much for staying with us, people. Politics and power. We're looking at the proposed cabinet of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. What caliber of Nigerians should be in that cabinet? How large should that cabinet be? And what are the expectations of Nigerians against the backdrop of the very harsh economic conditions that Nigerians face today? My guests are Dr. Damwo and Mr. Umar Yakubu. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time. So, you talked earlier on about competence and capacity as being some of the criteria that the president must look for in finding Nigerians to help him run his government. Then, of course, the question arises. There are Nigerians who are competent, who have the capacity, who are everywhere around the world. Should the president be going outside of his political party, across party lines, across generational lines, to look for such Nigerians? Can he do it? If he does it, does he have the capacity to do so? And if he does it, how is his political party likely to respond to that?
Well, I will take you back memory lane to 2003, if I'm correct, when then President Obasanjo brought in Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala to solve our debt crisis problem. Now, I don't want to believe she was a party or any party member at that time, but we had a problem. We had a debt crisis problem that needed to be solved. And to her credit and her team, I don't know who worked with her, that problem was solved. She was brought in from the IMF or the World Bank, if I'm correct. She was brought in to solve a problem, which she did it with distinction. And she was not a party member, but the problem was solved. Unfortunately, now we have gone back to that debt problem again. So the president has to look at people, just like the one example that I've given you, and there are several examples within and outside. There are some even within Nigeria that were gotten, they were not politicians, some were even academicians. They brought them from the university to solve a problem, and they solved that problem. So he has to look for those people to solve our already established problems. All our problems are well documented, but we have to prioritize them. The ones we can solve in the short term, those in the medium term, and in the long term. And so the ones, the low-hanging fruits, he has to get those people that can solve the short and medium-term problems now. Because all he has 4 years is 4 years. And unfortunately in Nigeria, governance usually takes about 2.5 years. One, it takes 6 months to settle down. The last final year is election. So you just have 2.5 years for governance. So he has to hit the ground running, which he has done so already, in getting those people to solve those problems he wants to solve. From the campaigns he has done, I think there are about 5 pillars there. Is just to plug in the right people to solve each and every note that he has there in solving any of those problems. So it's to look everywhere. He has to look everywhere of people that can deliver. It's about delivery now. No excuses, no procrastination. People that will just give results. I like to give the example of Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala because that was a brilliant thing that was done that time. Every country in the world had a debt crisis. They didn't know what to do, but somehow she managed to galvanize, whether it was her influence or whatever she did, where most of our debt was negotiated, even though there are some that disagreed that we should have done it. But for me, I think I liked it, and our debt came back to about $2 billion, if I'm correct, from whatever it was. So these are the kind of forward-thinking people we need for him to appoint, not at the ministerial level. Sometimes we like to look at ministers. A lot of areas we don't look at that has serious effects on the economy is those parastatals, departments and agencies. For example, now, if you appoint the wrong person, example, for the customs, now, because Nigerian Customs Service, don't forget you have a corruption problem, like this first subsidy removal now, is as a result that the customs cannot stop at least 400 trucks from crossing our borders. But your eyes are on the minister, so because you have the wrong customs boss or the wrong person heading the customs that cannot stop 400 trucks from siphoning fuel to our neighboring countries, you find that the whole effect now we're all feeling it today. Price is 540 naira because we have not solved that problem. So also, it's not only about ministers, we have to, the same monitoring and evaluation mechanism has to be deployed at every critical MDE. And when I mean critical, the ports, the ones that have to do with international trade, the one that has to do with commerce, the one that has to do with our national security, all those things are elements, energy security, our health security. The heads of all those MDAs have to be people that have absolute competence and that have the capacity to absorb all our problems and proffer solutions and ensure that they do it within the right framework.
Dr. Moore, do you agree with that suggestion? And how does the president deal with the likely political fallouts?
You know, in the final analysis, whether you are a member of APC or you are a member of another party, your ultimate goal is that Nigeria should do well. There should be progress, there should be development, there should be, welfare for the citizens. And that Nigeria should move from where we are now forward. So in the final analysis, that will even determine whether your party will win in the next election or not. So when you come to the basics, it's better to get people from anywhere, whether within your party or outside the party, within the country or outside the country, that will enable the president to perform. Because it is performance that will sell your party. It is performance that will give credibility and respect to the president. Because he's made an undertaking to Nigerians to be able to perform. So if he say because of political considerations, he will just pick people anyhow who will not add any value to the performance or his performance as a president, it will not help him. Therefore, finally, the ultimate buck stops on his table. But I want to assure you that in the final analysis, every voter is more interested in the performance of their president than the person that has helped the president to perform. Obviously, there are people within his party that have also high competence. You cannot say that the APC as a big party doesn't have those kinds of people. But we are saying that where other people can be picked from even other political parties that will add value to his government, he should be able to do that. Remember, once you become elected as a president, you are no longer a president for just your party. The constitutional requirement is that you become the president of the whole federation. Even your party will feel better if you perform well. And it does not matter where you get those people that have helped you to perform. Your party will still celebrate.
As some analysts have talked about the president having to put together a compact team. But of course, we know that with the constitutional requirement of appointing a minister from each of the 36 states, that makes it very difficult to do. But in spite of that, can the president achieve that goal of having a compact and efficient administrative system?
You see, let me borrow on my personal experience. I've been a special advisor on national security affairs to 3 different national security advisors under 3 different presidents. I can tell you right away that apart from the ministers that are appointed, each and every president has his kitchen cabinet. The kitchen cabinet in the final analysis are the ones that determine policy, if you are used to how the presidency operates. It is some of the people that make key decisions in the presidency are not necessarily the ministers you see there. When a minister makes a submission to the president, there is always a kitchen cabinet. The performance of the president is determined even more by the kitchen cabinet than the ministers. Because a president that has a powerful kitchen cabinet, anytime a member comes in from a minister or a minister proposes particular action, it is first submitted to that kitchen cabinet. And if a president does not do that, you will realize that you will find it very difficult to rule. Because your time will be spent, you will be overworking yourself, having no time even to sleep, because it's very difficult to rule. So aside from the general ministers that you know and you watch on the screen, every of the presidents that I've worked with in the villa, I've worked from Babangida right down to Salami, and a lot of other ones that have also been involved. So you notice that each and every one of them would always have a think tank and a kitchen cabinet. This kitchen cabinet may not be of high rank, but they have the kind of expertise that particular president wants. And they are the ones that have his ideological leaning where he wants to go. So when you are thinking of the ministers, realize that the failure of a president is not determined just by the ministers. It's also determined by this kitchen cabinet. Because the kitchen cabinet that is with the president, that the president can be open with them, the president can ask them to help them. So aside from the monitoring framework we are talking about, every president must also have a kitchen cabinet, who may not necessarily be known outside, but who help him to take decisions on issues. If you think that you can read every file, because there's no president is God, so you will not know all. But this kitchen cabinet will help you. When proposals come in from ministers, this is a kitchen cabinet that should screen it for you and then advise you as a president. If you do like that, you will enjoy your governance. And you will also do very well, because you will not just be relying on the ministers who may have some certain interests. They come from certain states. Their decisions may be biased in favor of their states. They come from certain regions. Their decisions may be biased in favor of those regions. In fact, if you nominate someone from your party or other party, their decisions may be biased. It's your kitchen cabinet that helps to put the president on the tour. Because it's the kitchen cabinet that looks at everything and is able to be open with the president and say, look, you have to go like this. My experience, based on my training as a public policy analyst, and my experience as special advisor, as I've just mentioned, have shown to me that presidents that have good kitchen cabinets, that look at memo, look at proposals, and advise them privately before they go to council, do better than presidents that are just depending on the ministers that are there. Because ministers too are politicians. They have their own political agenda. So it's the kitchen cabinet that helps to put them on focus. I will advise that every president, and for that matter, I believe that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has been very experienced in government. So I'm sure he knows that aside from the ministers that he will appoint, that everybody will know these are the ministers, he will also have a very powerful kitchen cabinet. It is the kitchen cabinet that determines the direction of policy, not even the ministers. Because it's the kitchen cabinet that understands the president's mind and try to reproduce the president's vision in what the ministers do. So my first advice would be that he should, aside from sending the list of ministers, he should be very careful who he selects as his kitchen cabinet. Because those are the real people in the ultimate analysis that help the president to govern very well.
Mr. Yakubu, in the 8 years of President Muhammadu Buhari, we saw plenty of hiring, but very little of firing. I mean,
zero.
I mean, in 8 years, I can't remember if there were up to 2 or 3 cabinet reshuffles and all of that. In spite of the fact that many of his ministers were ineffective and inefficient, do you see President Bola Ahmed Tinubu being different?
Yeah, of course, based on precedents, luckily both of them, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has been a governor before and as a senator. Well, I don't have anything, I'm not sure what he did as a senator because the time was short. But as a governor, from what we have read, you could see that he was a decision maker. Decision maker in the sense that he took decisions, whether right or wrong, but he was a decision maker in ensuring that when he gives you a rule to do, he will follow up and ensure that you do it. Well, it's all about governance styles. And the former President Buhari was probably running a system that we had probably in the early 60s, where you will give somebody a portfolio, and because he's honest, I just trust him, I just give him and expect him to deliver. It's a governance style. People have their different governance styles. Maybe that worked then, and it may work now in some areas. But I don't believe it was good for Nigeria because, like you said, the firing ratio was very low. Not only, it's not about firing just anybody. What we have not seen anybody penalized for any inaction, because there were so many inactions that were exposed by the media, even within the governments itself, but there was no action was taken. So that governance, I don't know what it is, but I don't think it worked for Nigeria. But right now, I don't think from the antecedents of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu that I do not want to believe that somebody will not be competent and there will be something has been exposed on him and no action will be taken. I don't think there will be two different governance styles. You can see already the action that has been taken already in the last 1 or 2 months. I don't think that would have happened in the last 8 years. Yes, I'm just giving an example. So there will be difference. To borrow from what he said, there's a proverb in Hausa where we say, I'm loosely translating it now. You cannot have a bad leader or a bad king, only bad advisors. And if you look at the history of empires, most empires and governance have failed based on the advisors around that leader. So it's also very important to have the right credible people, or if you call them the kitchen cabinet or the cabal or whatever name we want to give them, you have to have the right people that have the vision of the president and vision of the people to want to do the right things at the right time. And why they should be good, they don't have the baggage of politics, most of them. You are usually picked because you are close to the president and he likes you. Unlike the minister that has a constituency that he has to feed. Maybe he has an ambition to be governor or a senator or something. So our eyes too should be on those special advisors that he got approval from the National Assembly to look at them to ensure that doing the right things too and ensure that they're helping the vision of the president and that of Nigerians.
All right. Well, of course, you talked about advisors, kitchen cabinet and all of that. In the last dispensation, the president did have an economic advisory team, which many people think either didn't work effectively or the president wasn't listening to them. Here is another opportunity. What are you looking at? What are you thinking of in terms of an economic team that could actually help the president in projecting his economic agenda?
You see, these are the areas that when the president comes to those areas, he must throw politics aside. You see, in appointing ministers, naturally, politics continues to play a large role. But when it's narrowed down to your advisors, to your economic advisors, to the economic team, you must be sure that it's no longer an issue of politics anymore. It's an issue of performance. Because if you do not put competent people with the right experience, the right attitude, that are no longer, don't have any political ambition or not even undermining you, their ultimate goal is for you to succeed and for your government to succeed and for the nation to move forward. So I would advise that the most competent hands, of course, could be selected for ministers, but the ones that are closest to him and can perform very well and know their onions, those are the ones that must be in the economic team. Or those are the ones that will form what I call the kitchen cabinet. Because kitchen cabinet is not only the economic area. You can, for instance, they don't even have to be government employee. You can have professors at the universities that are not made ministers, but you know that they are very best in poverty eradication. You bring them into the kitchen cabinet. There are others that are experts in one particular area where having problems. Maybe it's in national security. You know, the NSA is there, but you have to have also somebody when the NSA brings a memo that will look at it and tell you what to tell the NSA or to be able to react to the NSA. So he has to be very careful in appointing not just these advisors, but other people who may not necessarily be known outside as advisors, but who have particular expertise that he requires to depend upon to be able to succeed. Because a president that does not have people doing these kinds of assignment for you, governance is very tedious. You will realize that you will not enjoy your presidential tenure, because you will be overworking yourself, starting fires and not sleeping. But if you have your internal team very well, and then the ministers are competent and relevant to their areas, you will realize that the country will be moving. Even if you are enjoying yourself and traveling the country, there will be memos that are coming to you, and people have done analysis on it. You don't just announce a policy because you want to announce a policy. If you want to announce a policy, you send it first to your advisor, your inner cabinet. They look at your kitchen cabinet, looks at it before you even table it with the ministers. And they anticipate what would be the reactions of the ministers. As he said correctly, some of the ministers have their own hidden agenda. And their own reactions may be based on those agendas. But you realize that the kitchen cabinet reports to you, only you know them, and they are not constrained by political considerations because they are not necessarily known by the public. Therefore, you have the best result from those kinds of people. Objectivity, capacity, and performance becomes their yardstick. And those are the ones that make presidents to perform.
Mr. Yakubu, if you had the opportunity, and you do have now, to speak to the president today as a policy analyst and to talk to him on this issue, what will you be telling him? What caliber of person do you think he should be looking at as economic team, economic advisors? Because as you have stated, it appears that in the kitchen cabinet, the economic team is even more critical and more important than ministerial appointments.
Yeah, every serious country, and we're a serious country anyway, but every serious country does not joke with two sectors: the security sector and the economic sector. Now, if you look at the last regime, and if you look at all our macroeconomic indicators, unemployment rate, inflation rate, all those, our debt rate, you find that in 8 years there was no economist in the cabinet team. There was no economist. The central banker was not an economist. The Minister of Finance was not an economist. At all those, the FRS chairman was not, well, that could have been an accountant anyway. But when you don't have sound economists driving you, sorry to mention another name again, you could see the difference when Professor Charles Soludo was the seasoned economist, was a central bank governor. Sunusi, Lamido Sunusi, you could see the difference when you brought in an accountant. There are some critical issues, macroeconomic issues, that if you don't have a sound economic team, you have a problem. So my advice are two: security sector, economic sector, please devolve from politics. I'm happy, I think he has gotten the security sector right by appointing Malano Rebadu as the National Security Advisor, because as long as you are looking at security from the realm of the military, you are still going to be having a problem. We have energy security issues, health security issues, food security issues. These are not military issues. You understand? They are not connected issues. So you have to look at those things, and the best thing is to get somebody with a police background or non-military background, let me use that word, a non-military background to address these issues. Then, of course, the economic team, you need to get sound economy, because one thing about economists, they look at figures, zero emotions in it. It's either this, if you don't do this, this will happen. If you do this, like President Harry Truman, when they say on the one hand this will happen, on the other hand this will happen. That's what they look at. They look at facts and figures and give it to the president. There will be zero politics. So these two issues, I hope he will look at these two things and deploy them effectively. One has already been gotten right. We'll hope the next economic team will be gotten right.
Thank you so much, Umar Yakubu. He's Executive Director, Center for Fiscal Transparency and Integrity Watch. And he's been joined by Dr. Damo, who is a good governance advocate and Executive Chairman, Center for Poverty Eradication, Development and Equal Opportunity. Thank you so much for your time. Well, that's our program for today. Please join us again when we bring you a fresh edition of People, Politics, and Power. Bye for now.